Live!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Assassins of Language Learning, where each week we talk
Hello,
about...
everybody!
Oh my gosh!
Oh, hi! Wow, it's a conversation with yourself. It's wonderful.
Yes. You know why? It's
You
because I
don't
don't
need
know
me here.
So,
Ah,
I have it in the background too, because there's this whole thing like technological difficulties, trying to see the chat and everything, and then realizing like, yeah, I'm also a grandma, like you were saying before about being. But yeah, so I had it on in the background to try to see the chat and see who is talking, if anyone will be talking, and then I realized like, oh my gosh, my headphones aren't working.
I'm so
Hello,
sorry, you
and
poor thing.
And so, yeah, anyway, welcome to Assassins of Language Learning, where we talk about a different motivation killer each week. And I'm so excited to introduce my guest this week, or to have her talk about herself, actually, but so excited to have you here. You are so remarkable and sweet, and not just because of what you've done for the language learning community and what you're doing for the language community, but also because I'm always seeing you cheer people on and being so supportive. And I mean, always in my Twitter feed, I'm seeing notifications of like Ophelia's talking about like this person's channel in such a positive light and
Oh,
everything. And I just think it's great and such a rare quality amongst YouTube.
oh.
So I am so excited to have you here and finally meet you.
Oh, it's so lovely to meet you too. I mean, I've just Angela and I started talking about 5 minutes beforehand, and it was basically just 5 minutes of me not letting Angela speak and me just being like, no, but like this, like I like this about you too. Like this is what I like. But thank you very much. I mean, I just anyway, I like it's like I'm the only reason that people have like come across my videos more or less is because other people have been like, check out this person. Like I was very lucky that some people like posted it on Tumblr and things, and so I just think it's really important to do that because otherwise you just, I don't know, I just think, that's why I'm here. That's kind of, I don't know. I just think like what you should do, especially it kind of makes it feel like more of a community that way. So anyway, well, thank you so much for having me. We've been planning this for quite a while and it's my fault. So I'm so sorry. Thank you for having me.
Seriously, life happens and stuff. But anyway, I'm so excited to have you here, and especially to talk about this week's topic. Now, it's a topic
Yeah.
people have talked about before, but I kind of wanted to put a different spin on it, get a different perspective, and I'm really glad that you could join me for that.
I'm excited. I mean, it kind of when I told my boyfriend, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm talking with this wonderful YouTube lady about perfectionism," and he was like, "Really, you're talking about perfectionism?" Because I think there's lots of parts of my life where I'm so not a perfectionist, and so, but there are also parts where I am a bit too obsessive and interested in things like that. So it's so I just I'm excited. I'm excited to chat about this with you, definitely.
Oh, and I'm excited too. Now, perfectionism to me is one of those things that seems good on the surface when you're not thinking about it too much. Because, like, what
Yeah,
would be wrong with wanting to do everything right? Right? But
visual. Yeah.
I feel like you could so easily miss the signs of perfectionism in your life. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, my first question to you is, when does just wanting to do a good job and do things to the best of your ability become perfectionism? What would you say is the line between the two of those?
Such an interesting question. I read it to my mum beforehand because I was like, "Isn't this such a cool question?" Anyway, um, it's that's such an interesting one. It's obviously, and it also, I think it really varies. I'd imagine it based on different aspects of life. You would hope, and this is a gross oversimplification, and I have no way of knowing, but you'd hope that like a brain surgeon would want to be a perfectionist because that would be my understanding of something, whereas I'd imagine that someone who's a writer like shouldn't be a perfectionist because writing can be like improved exponentially, not exponentially but eternally. But obviously that's not really how it works. That's not the reality at all. You can this so I think it's such an interesting thing because it's what like also what constitutes being perfect in different things is also really hard to understand. And in when it comes to languages, I make lots of mistakes in English. I said exponentially. That would be a vocabulary mark off for me if I was doing an English test. So I don't know. I think it's really hard to say. It's because it's a very personal thing. What constitutes being a good job, or a perfect job. And it's also, I mean, I also don't necessarily think that anything is perfect. But you just have to be like, okay, that will do. And I try and pretend that perfection doesn't exist. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Because mine are really rambly, even though I've been thinking about them. So what are your thoughts?
I would say there's nothing wrong with wanting to do a good job. And I think the point you brought up about the brain surgeon is very interesting because, yes, you should want to do like a perfect job, and there's a lot of stress in that. But I think that, when it comes to writing, like you said, or learning a language, there's always room for improvement, and you should be working towards that. And that, I guess, kind of like, I don't know, like, don't kick yourself for it. And that's when it starts becoming perfectionism, is when instead of just wanting to do the best but accepting your mistakes, you start to kind of chastise yourself for your mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when your life is taken over by something. So I think it's easier if you talk about an example. So as this is, I don't know, like I think, say whatever you like, I want to speak perfect French, which is maybe something, it's probably something I say relatively regularly when I'm talking to non-language learner people, because if I was talking to a language learner person, they'd be like, that doesn't mean anything. Perfect French doesn't exist, or maybe that's not correct. So I think I also wouldn't necessarily say I want to speak perfect. Would I? Would I even vocalize I want to aim for perfection? Maybe, I don't know. I know you. I know what you was like. Okay, Ophelia, collect your thoughts about these questions, but there's just so many aspects of perfectionism, and it's really, So I should probably do better at untangling it. But yeah, I think so. Okay, how would you define perfect in a language set, like example?
Oh, that is a really tough question because the truth is,
Sorry, this is your video and I boycotted it. I'm really sorry.
I don't mind because you could be bringing up questions that I wouldn't have thought of and bring a new twist to this that I hadn't previously thought of. So one of the things I was thinking of beforehand was, like you said, through personal experiences, kind of what could I get from the talk about today? And those, you were saying, what defines being perfect? I don't know. One thing about language is that it tends to be filled with rules, but then when you kind of use it in the real world, people don't always follow those rules. Like, I've seen so many native speakers of a language spell things wrong. They can't distinguish between their, like, THERE, and then THEIR, or THE.
Or even your whole continent. I mean, your whole continent has spelling mistakes all over the place. No, that was a joke. No, sorry. Yes, no, I'm listening. Sorry. Sorry.
I love it. But yeah, so I would say, like, pulling from that, I see people type things all the time like that. But yet, I think maybe people do look down upon that. But then also, I guess, like, people don't always follow. Maybe those are some more obvious rules, but maybe there are some that aren't so obvious. Like, maybe the difference between good and well, and people don't always follow that. And the majority of people, at least here in my area, would not really correct you and say you're wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot
or
of
even like or even like because I often, when speaking to certain people, purposefully make mistakes in English because I think it's like it's a fun way of speaking. So for example, I think it's fun to make words so translating verbs to nouns incorrectly, so like I'm trying to think of or the other way round, or I don't know. So for example, say it's fun to say things like, sometimes it entertains me to say things like fastly, when obviously you're just so fast. Or I was with my boyfriend is a Russian speaker and his family are Russian, and Russian speakers. And I was talking to his dad at the weekend about how I introduced him to the word lad because he's a big football fan, and I was like, I think that it's a very English word. I don't think you use it in North America, but and I was saying, if you wanted to sort of sound really British, after or really English, after the football match, if your team did well, you could always go, the lads did good. And that is a horrific, grammatical
Wow.
sentence to say, but it's just, it's a bit like, yeah, the lads did good. It's and so there's something about kind of purpose. So I often purposefully make mistakes in English in certain contexts, very informal contexts, because I think it's fun to speak like that. Now I'm saying that aloud. I think that's bizarre. But then, in reality, I do want to speak English properly. So, can you have those things? Probably you can have them both at the same time. But I think that's a bizarre thing I do. So yeah.
Yeah, and I used to make this joke that English anymore has become whatever you want it to be. We kind of just make up verbs out of nowhere, or like we coin terms so quickly nowadays with the internet that really it's so easy to just say anything and people won't even notice whether it's right or wrong.
Sure, exactly.
The internet has anything to do with that either. So perfect is really hard to define. And I see that Andy Roberts actually left a comment here that says perfectionism in language learning takes many forms. For example, some people consider polyglots frauds if they don't speak a lot of languages as well as a native speaker. In my mind, their expectations are perfectionistic. That is a mouthful. But yeah, I would agree with that. Kind of going back to what is perfect, most people would say perfect would be a native speaker. But the point I'm trying to make, and that I'm sure you are too, is that even native speakers aren't always perfect either. So that's to keep in mind.
So, because you have some people who make, as you were saying, sometimes people who will make grammatical mistakes because people aren't necessarily aware of a difference, or terrible people like me who will make grammatical mistakes because I think it's just a way. It's just like a dialect that I've developed with my friends. So yeah, so I think it's kind of exactly how personal perfection is, even when it comes to, as you said, like languages have rules. You use this word here and this is the order of things, particularly in English, which is very kind of lots of informal rules, and like things seem to follow patterns, and they kind of do, but then also be like, surprise, there are many exceptions. So I know many languages are like that, but I feel like when you have something like Russian where you can sort of put words in any order, and so you have lots of rules, but you also have like flexibility within those rules. When you have languages like English, where it's like, no, there's a very specific order of things, unless you want to communicate something different on purpose. And I don't know, it's interesting, the kind of the complication in sort of the rules and the flexibility in different languages as well. So the perfectionism in different languages is also interesting. Sorry, that was also a mouthful. So sorry, yes.
Yeah, and I would say perfect is kind of hard to define for the reason that nobody is perfect. Like the rules are there, but even if you follow them all, it's still going to sound weird. So then what's the difference between, like, would you rather sound natural to the people you're speaking to, or would you rather sound correct, which people aren't going to notice nowadays?
Would you rather sound natural? Would you rather sound correct? So interesting. If I posed you that question, would you rather sound natural? Would you rather sound correct? I would definitely choose natural.
I would too. And I think that you can be natural and correct depending on the language. But sometimes you just hear these people that learn English straight out of the textbook and they sound so formal. And you kind of just giggle a little bit because you're like, wow, like we don't say things like that. Here's another way you could say it. And they'll be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But I think it goes back to like that is the correct way, but people just don't say it all the time. Now, I'm not saying go out and be wrong all the time and like you're making
I don't do it all the time, Angela. It's just sometimes. No. Yeah, no, like, I'm listening.
Make bad habits and stuff. No, like don't go out and make bad habits. I am not.
Oh gosh. My career as an English teacher is over. I've revealed myself. It's interesting. So such an interesting topic, and I think, and I like how you. Sorry, this is a bit meta because I'm talking about the video that we're doing as we're doing it. But I like how because I think people often talk about perfectionism in language learning, but it's often in the kind of motivational way of like, don't worry about being perfect and whatever. Which is nice, and I think it's an important thing to get across. But I think, I don't know, what does that mean? I think to me that's much more interesting than just like, don't worry about it. Even though I need to hear, don't worry about it. But, you know, sometimes. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we all need to hear the don't worry about it, but at the same time, there is really nothing wrong with wanting to do like be as correct as possible. It's just that when it takes over your mind and that's all
Yeah.
you have, and it becomes a factor that kind of demotivates you,
Yeah.
yeah, then that's when it is not good anymore and it actually becomes
No.
a killer. So then my next question to you, because I feel like this takes a lot of self-awareness, is what are some things that you think people are missing that might be factors of perfectionism?
So I feel like I encounter this much more with when it comes to work than I do necessarily in language learning, because it's quite, you said, it takes a lot of self-awareness to know. However, actually, so for example, yesterday I spent about a whole hour or so just trying to learn how to properly make different Swedish sounds. And then I did the set, and then I was like, also, while we're here, let's also try and like then say like how we have these Swedish sentences. I'm going to find out what they are in Danish, and then I'm going to try and learn how to do a Danish accent. Why did I do? I have no intention on learning Danish. I just find it really fascinating. I was kind of slightly obsessively recording myself and trying to get it right, and that is because I am quite obsessed with accents in general. I think they're fascinating. I think it's really I think mimicry and imitations are really interesting as well. And kind of accents for me are so bound up in that. So yeah, so that's quite obsessive and not necessarily that's a sign. That's not even a sign. That's like an end product of like, you know, maybe don't do that. So but I kind of see it much more with work, when people will, you know, literally spend an unhealthy amount of time obsessing over a piece of work. And that's probably where I come across it more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good one. Once your mindset becomes obsessive, then I think that's when you definitely start to get into perfectionism. Like I said, if it's
Yeah.
taking over your life instead of
Yeah.
being fun, then that's where it's like not healthy anymore.
Yeah. So there seems to be a kind of a feeling that both you and I have, and maybe if I'm wrong, please tell me, that there is an unhealthy side to, like, not even side, like there's a connection perhaps, for me anyway, I think, talking about it with you, I think there seems to be a slightly unhealthy connection between perfectionism and being unhealthy. Like there's something about that, because I think within my mind you know, perfectionism does conjure an obsessive side, but then maybe that's not perfectionism, because perfectionism is being perfect. So if there's an obsessive side that comes with it, then that's not perfect, is it? So I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, I would say that I do.
So what when that when you when so do you I'm trying to think. So have you ever spent an hour trying to perfect an accent of a language you have no intention of ever learning? Do you know, my own here? No. But you know, what I'm sorry, I feel like I'm skirting part of your question, but what kind of have you ever sort of maybe become a bit obsessed with language learning, or kind of trying to get something right?
Oh, yes, all the time. Even when it comes to singing music, I try to get the accent
Mm,
down as well in
mm,
that I'm listening to the song. So, yeah,
mm,
I say stuff like that with pronunciation, because I know people say start in the beginning or else you'll form bad habits. And it's true,
mm.
you want to be able to be understood by other people, but it is
Yeah,
to get obsessed with that. And then
yeah.
kind
I'm
of, I
so
wanted to
guilty
make a
of that.
point here, but it's gonna go into the next question, so I'm just gonna ask it, like weave it in there.
Sure.
But
Okay.
basically, if is perfectionism self-motivated, or do you find that it's motivated more by other people? Now, the reason why I'm asking this is because what I was gonna say about the accent, for instance, sometimes you might get a comment like on my very old videos of Spanish. I remember someone mentioned kind of my vowels when I was learning how to speak Spanish, and like my pronunciation, the vowels maybe were
Yeah.
more Americanized. I don't know.
Mm.
And So I kind of got obsessed with that and was like, oh man, like I need to do better because someone else is pointing out my mistakes. So would you say that, I mean, that's just one instance of something. I'm not completely answering the question yet, but would you say
No.
it's more self-motivated,
Mm.
or would you say it could be motivated by others?
I think that, like, I think probably the most common version is when you have the, combination of the outside and the internal triggers that work together to kind of make you go, right, this is, I'm obsessed now, this has to be perfect. Because if you didn't care about learning Spanish, for example, if not even if you didn't care, but if you just didn't think it was important, but it's when someone says something to you that you think is, it's like, oh no, I think that's important to me. This is not a very helpful example, and it actually probably shouldn't. Oh, this is going to come across really like bragging. Okay, I'm giving a talk at the Polyglot conference, and I have like all the comments on that video. Sorry, I just because I've been thinking about this quite obsessively. And I'm so sorry. That was so braggy. I didn't know how to introduce that better. I didn't mean it like that.
You're excited. Go watch her.
I am. Yeah, and all the comments were lovely, apart from one that was like, this sounds more like a history talk than a language related talk. And I was like, and so now I'm obsessed, and I'm like, okay, I'm just like, being like, this has to be a language learning talk. It was just one person being like, this, and it's like, it's true. It is quite. I'm a historian. I do history, so like that was probably fair enough that I'm kind of looking at languages through the lens of history, and not kind of in a linguistics way, but in a sort of more meta, how we approach history, how we form ideas about the past via language. But yeah, so so that's kind of a combination a bit like yours, where like I really care about the talk, and also but I also want other people to be like, no, this talk belonged here rather than at whatever the medievalist society, because that's my fear. I'm like, oh god, this has to be called the Polyglot conference, for goodness sake, really. So yeah, so I think that is I often am really prone to that, where it's like something I believe about myself or something I'm worried about already, and then someone else says it, and it's like, okay, well, now I've got to make sure, we've got to be certain the balance is perfect. So I think, but then I there are lots of people who would be like, because when I talk to people about it, so when I would be like, can I practice it to you, and talk to them about it, they'll be like, yeah, don't worry about it, don't worry, that's fine. And I just am so not, don't worry about it, I'm so not chill. There's nothing about me that's chill, I don't think. So yeah, so I think that it's very I think it's partly my personality that kind of makes me want to be like, no, this has got to be the best now. So sorry, I'm taking quite a long time to answer your questions, but I just think they're really interesting, and I'm trying to sort of sort through my thoughts about it, because I have very contradictory thoughts about perfectionism, where I'm like, it doesn't exist, also I strive for it, also I know that that's unhealthy, and so I don't know how to like get it all across.
Yeah, I think you said something very important in that it's your personality a lot of the time. So, depending on the type of person you are, it could be very self motivated. Like you were saying, a lot of the pressure is coming from yourself and based on what other people think, right? And the comments that they've made. So, it may seem like it's other people making you be a perfectionist, but it's also inside you have this feeling of, if I'm like getting this right at all.
Oh, I'm sure you are.
It's this feeling of kind of like, I need to do better, but it's like you're the one who is behind this talk of I need to do better, not someone else telling you, oh, I need to do better.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, because I don't know. Generally, I get very nice comments on just like sort of YouTube comments, for example, and mostly I get really helpful comments and things. Actually, that's the thing. So when it comes to perfectionism, I am. And it's partly because I've been learning French for a much longer time than I have the other languages that I study, and it's also because it's the language I speak to the best ability. But I get, I think, much harsher comments about my French than, say, like about my Russian. And I look at my old Russian videos and I'm like, this is absolutely abysmal. I mean, I'm glad I put it there so I can be like, well, there has been some progress. And so do you notice, do you feel like there's a different standard for perfectionism across different languages? And I know this is a small field because it's just, you know, for example, YouTube commenters, but do you notice a difference in that or not?
About, I guess,
Between
like,
like, say, because you learned, for example, when you learned Portuguese, because you did learn Portuguese, didn't you? You did learn Portuguese? You did, yeah. Or like when you did your Polish challenge, for
yeah,
example.
I guess
Um,
the comments that people are making about my language learning, you would say?
yeah, and like, does it vary from different languages? Because I
Yeah.
think I noticed that like maybe I just also think that like when it comes to French people, like the French are very harsh, and so if they you know I was so flattered because the other day someone well, not the other day, it was a couple of months ago, but someone was like, "Oh, are you from Belgium?" It was a Parisian, and when I was speaking to them in French, and I was like, this. I mean, I can go no further in life now. Like this is the best thing. So I don't know. I find anyway. This is just such a tangent. I'm so sorry. I'm not speaking very concisely at all.
I think it's a wonderful question. And I think that honestly, yes, I would agree with you on that. I think it does vary from language to language because, in my personal experience, I find that people have given me a lot more leeway with Korean. I do see a comment here. I have been looking at the comments as well as, being engaged in the conversation here.
I'm actually going
And
to open that. Actually,
there
very
was
good job.
actually a comment in Korean, and I feel so bad because, like, yeah, I can read it, I can understand it. It says 한국어 잘하세요, and wow, like I just haven't studied Korean in forever, and like I feel like with Korean people give me such like more leeway because
Mm,
I only learn a few phrases and they're like, wow, you're like really good at this. And I think they're being sincere. But
mm,
then when I'm studying Spanish, which is my much stronger language, then I feel
mm,
like they'll pick at the very little things and they'll be like, this is subjunctive or, you know,
yeah.
stupid stuff like that. And I'm like, oh man, like I feel bummed out. And then when it comes to a language like Polish, I've seen a little bit of both. The majority
Mm,
of the time, people have been very kind to me.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know my Polish was like very, very beginner, still is like so
No,
many.
I loved that series. That's one of my favorite things that you've done on your channel. I just think I love it. I think it's so great. I watched it kind of obsessively. No, I watched it, so I just thought it was brilliant. I really loved it. But yeah, sorry.
But I found that people were very kind to me with that for the most
Mm,
part. There was one like really rude flame comment, but otherwise people were like super nice like most of the time. And I know that I was like very, very wrong in the way I was speaking, the grammar and everything, the vocabulary, like the case that I might have chosen
mm, mm, mm.
that specific sentence because that's so different from English, yet they're all so supportive. But then with Spanish, like I said, not to just like say that everyone's rude, but I'm more likely to get a comment that talks
Yeah,
about a mistake that I make in Spanish
sure.
versus Korean or Polish.
Yeah, and also, and I wonder whether this is also to do with the fact that like it's very common for people in the areas of the world that you and I are in to learn French and Spanish as well. Whereas I have a real sense of so when I want to I haven't made very much many things about Arabic, but Arabic is a language that I really love, and I haven't really made because you're like I haven't improved. I cannot update this. And I did notice just kind of I don't know people sometimes just being much more excited about like oh that's cool that you're learning Arabic like cool whatever that's so great and like the same with Russian and it doesn't matter how horrible my Russian is people will kind of give me tips for the level that I'm at about like how to improve things and maybe the harshness of the French is sometimes just like I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say there's a lot of constructive things when it comes to the French. I would prefer if it was like, oh, this is this is the gender of this or whatever. Sometimes it's just like, oh, you're a stupid so and so. So you're like, okay, oh thanks, okay, bye. But so I don't know. So I don't know. That never happens on Russian videos. It's just like, oh, this is so exciting. So anyway, I have the live chat here as well. Thank you for joining us, Andy Roberts, and also for making up all of the chat. I appreciate it. Thank you. So, carry on.
Yes, and hello to Blood Falcon 2K7 as well. I did see the message before. I just didn't want to interrupt anybody during this chat. And I did want to ask you, so Ophelia, you did say that you struggle with perfectionism when it comes to pronunciation. Are there other aspects of language learning that you struggle with perfectionism?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one, because I enjoy the speaking side the most. So I know that there's, aspects of French grammar, basically all of the relative pronouns that I've just gone, you're great. You're a great group of gang. You're a great gang. Have a nice time. I don't want to spend any time with you, any more time than I already have. So they I do know that there are some, but then there are other bits of grammar that I have drilled quite obsessively at different points. And I have really tried to get on with the relative pronouns, but so many rules and so many exceptions. So yeah, I can definitely get quite I think part of the problem is I probably prioritize pronunciation and then grammar and then vocabulary last. And that's really not, great. You can pronounce the table well, but what can you say? So yeah, so that's a problem that I need to improve. I just, you're like, oh, I have a list of words. Great, thanks. Whereas I'm like, oh, there's a little puzzle with the grammar, or oh, I have to make my mouth do new things. So yeah, so I think I can, particularly when it comes to conjugations, I just find conjugations really fun. So yeah, I can get quite it's quite addictive as well when you get things right. I think because I do a humanities subject at university, so there's something about I don't know, doing something that is less where there's an answer that I like. What about you? What are you, apart from your Spanish vowels, what kind of
things
gets you?
With imperfectionism? I would say definitely grammar.
Oh no, it's gone. I don't know if it's Angela that's gone or if it's me. It's all gone. It's gone quiet. I don't know what to do. Okay. It's gone quiet. But can you hear me? But just Angela's gone. Just Angela's gone. Thank you, Andy. I was gonna type out a little thing. Okay. Well, why don't until Angela returns, I can look at the live stream chat. Sorry, Angela. I hope you're well, and I hope you return to us soon. Perfectionism in language learning. Angela read that. In my mind, their expectations are perfectionistic. The debate over whether adults or children learn languages better is also influenced by perfectionism because it's easier for children to become fully bilingual in their pronunciation, especially. Yeah, I think that is, because I think that was about the polyglot standards, about I can hear you but not see you. That might be because Angela is doing the swap over, maybe. Who knows? Okay. I hope you're well, Angela. I hope you're okay. Can I send? If I send Angela a message, are you okay? Send Angela a message. We've tried to make contact. Oh, waiting to join this call. Oh, here she is.
Yes.
Ah, there we go. You've returned. I'm so excited.
About that. My internet.
No, that's fine.
Has been really, really bad lately, and so yeah, all the technical difficulties are happening today.
It's okay. I was like, okay, I guess I'm just, sorry, Angela, but I have your channel now. So
Yeah,
I was just looking. I was like, okay, time to look at what people have been saying. Some people think it's useless for adults to try and learn languages. Yes, Angela studied Korean. I don't remember if she studied any Japanese.
Studied Japanese for a little bit of time,
Whereas I just watched lots of reality TV documentaries in about 2011 about K-pop bands, and got really excited about K-pop and Korean culture and things. So yeah, and then also Han Kang. I've been reading her novels that they're translated into English. She wrote The Vegetarian, and she also wrote Human Acts, and she also has a poetry book. And I just like, there's Korean on the covers, and I'm just like, oh, you're so pretty. And every time I see Korean around London, I'm like, because there are a bunch of Korean churches, for example, and I'm like, wow. And like, it's always like a really big banner, and I'm like, wow, it's so beautiful. So I have quite a deep love of Korean. So yeah. Anyway, thank you, Andy, for helping us identify the technical difficulties, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. Am I the problem? So there we go.
Anyway, so what advice would you give to people? Because we have established that we both have qualities of being a perfectionist, like symptoms of perfectionism. But
Sure.
what would you say are some ways, like, what would you tell people who are struggling with it? What kind of advice would you give? What would you tell them to do that makes it better for them to not struggle with it so much?
What would I tell them to do? I think kind of just, okay, take a breath and think about what your priorities are. And then separately from that, assign time to things. And then you're not allowed to go past the time for that, because I'm a workaholic, and I love, and if it was like humanly possible, I would probably, end up being the kind of person that spends all their time working. And I don't want to be that person, and that is not a healthy way to live. So it ends up with being like, okay, well, after today, I'm not allowed to touch that piece of work anymore. And like, okay, we'll review it in a week and then done. So I have to just kind of, I don't know, parent myself. So time limits and thinking about priorities, and like asking yourself the question of like, if I just leave this behind, will, and move on, spending more time on this thing, will that actually change the result really? Or will it just make, I don't know, will it make it worse even? So I don't know. So those would be the things that I try and think about when I'm like, oh, I'm becoming quite into this. And I should probably, go outside, breathe some fresh air. What about you?
I would say, kind of like you said, with like, I guess, like your priorities and stuff. I really like that, because for me, language learning, it was kind of a priority because of school. So it was something that I had to do work wise and everything. But also,
Yes.
it's a hobby for me. I really
Sure.
enjoy learning languages. And for most people, it's not something that they have to do in school. If they're here, it's
Mm.
probably because they actually like doing it and they're trying to find tips on like how to be serious about language learning. So I would say,
Mm.
if it's a hobby for you and not for school, because those are two different scenarios,
For
if it's
sure.
a hobby for you, I would say, like you were saying about making it a priority, make sure that you prioritize the fact that you enjoy doing it. Now, you'll go through periods of time where you're not as motivated or anything, or like maybe it's not as fun anymore and you need to switch over
Mm.
routine, and that's fine. But when it comes to being a perfectionist, make sure that being perfect is not your goal, but just doing a good
Mm.
job and getting the meaning across is your goal, and
Yeah.
making sure that you enjoy it because it's a hobby and not something for school. Whereas for
Yeah.
school, you actually do have to like do it perfectly for your teacher.
That's a good point. Yeah, because taking a language class, I took a language class last year. I took a French class, and it was just the least helpful thing I could have possibly done, really. I found it really, because the teacher read I he was very French in his way of teaching, in that it was very like, oh, this person doesn't know this answer. We're gonna like stop and be like, you don't know the answer. You need to work harder. It was quite like, I was like, oh, this is not the soft, like nice English education that I've had. It's always like, oh, don't worry. Does someone else know? So last year I really didn't enjoy making videos about languages, and I didn't enjoy studying languages, because that class, I was like, I have to be the best, I have to defeat this teacher. And that is really, I'm also not a very aggressive person either, so it wasn't aggressive. I meant to defeat in terms of like, be like, no, I'm sorry, I know the answer to everything. You can't know the answer to everything, it's a language, for goodness sake. So I kind of, that was an example of sort of forcing a kind of perfectionism on me, but the priority was the wrong thing. The priority was like, I'm going to survive this class and I will be the best. And that is not why I took the class in the first place. I took the class in the first place because I was like, it'll be great to have some more direction with my French learning, which I'm still looking for. But, it was just not, it was not the right thing, a kind of, I'm sorry, what was the question? I'm so sorry.
No, no, it's all good. So the question was basically like, what was I saying? Oh my goodness, now I'm off the train.
Was it the about what advice? No, that was the advice was the last question.
The last question that we talked about was kind of what advice would you give someone who's struggling through it? And then my answer had to do with the school thing. And I said a school environment's different from your personal environment.
Oh, yes, you were talking about you being at school. Yeah, and because I was thinking, basically, language learning is so much my hobby, and I am far less for example, my other hobby, I guess, which is kind of my job this year, is, playwriting. And I am definitely quite obsessive about that, and perfectionistic in a way. That's also interesting because I think maybe because I'm like, okay, there's a limit to how good I can ever be at writing. I'll just, I can only be as good. Whereas I'm like, but language learning, I could just learn it. It's learning, so I can always learn more. And that attitude is not the best one. So it's interesting. I like being in kind of a mandatory thing when it went from being a hobby to being something that was part of my degree. Really had an impact on kind of my perfectionist attitude or lack of. So yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I would agree with that because my degrees were in languages. It was Spanish and French, and then I went on to do interpreting and translation. So a lot of it was about accuracy. And that is so easy to fall into the trap of perfectionism and comparison in that sense. Yeah, it's definitely harder if you're in the school environment. Now, my advice for if it's a hobby, like I said, keep it fun, switch up your routine once in a while, remember why you're doing this and like don't put so much pressure on yourself. Now, if it's for school, I guess like if you're taking it because you want to take a class to get better, that's one thing. If you're taking the class because you have to, that's another thing. Just get through the class, do the best that you can. And then if you're taking the class because you want to get better, just be very self-aware of the thoughts that are coming into your head. Whether people make comments or not about your work, think about your own mindset and what you're telling yourself. So are you telling yourself, I need to do better? Or are you telling yourself, I need to be perfect? Or I need to be as good as so-and-so? And just kind of that stuff, I would say.
Oh, Angela, such nice advice. I wish I'd heard that a year ago about what's your mindset. Angela, this has come a year too late. No, that's very, very true. And I think, yeah, I have nothing I can respond with because I'm like, yes, I wish I thought about that a year ago. Whereas I was like, oh, I'm doing this class because I love French and I need direction in my French love, my French love, and en fait, and so I need kind of, but then it became actually this is not the place to go if you love a language. This is the place to go if you want to be really accurate in the language. And I clearly don't care that much about accuracy. I do, but within reason. I don't want to have to sit there for hours and hours and think about Duquel or oh god, I hate them so much, Angela. Anyway, it was really the wrong environment for me, and I should have known. I've done, I did French in high school in sixth form, all the way through school, and I should have remembered that was what it was. But I thought it was going to be like this. I was like, I'm gonna take it back, but that's fine. So yeah, and then but so perfectionism in a hobby. So is there? because I know lots of people that are, I guess, and it's different. Yeah, no, you're right. Because I think the people that I tend to teach English to tend to be people who are, wanting to apply to a certain university or apply for a visa or citizenship or whatever. So that is also different because that's not the same thing as a hobby. But I guess there's still like you should still have goals in your hobbies. Maybe you don't have to. For language learning, I find it helpful to have goals. So, I think sometimes it can feel less like a hobby and more like work. I don't know. My thoughts are really tangled about it because I'm just like, yeah, no, this is me, Angela. This is like a therapy session. This is the problem. So thank you. Thank you for your wisdom.
It is a therapy session for me too, and I'm so glad, like I said, that we could talk about this. Even though I'm giving this advice, I struggled this past school year a lot with some of the things that we're talking about. Even like the whole Assassins of Language Learning series, I've been assassinated by like so many of these things. But I've struggled with a lot of these things, and I am so thankful to hear different perspectives from these people that I feature, such as yourself, and I'm really happy to hear these things. So yeah.
What do you think is the worst? What are you the like out of your different assassins? What's the one that you're like, oh no, I'm being hit by this all the time, and has it changed since you've been doing the series?
I would say probably it's either perfectionism or comparison. And that's
Sure.
why like it just really hits home to me.
And they go hand in hand though, sometimes.
Yeah.
Because even if it's comparison to your idea of what you should be as a person, like I think that's a very important form of comparison that doesn't is usually like against your friends or against your siblings or whatever. But I think actually comparing myself to a past version of me and then like this imagined future version is something that I get really caught up in. And then I become very like, okay, we're just going to do Danish for an hour. And you're like, why are you doing this? Ophelia, you don't want to learn Danish. It's just like, well, you never know. Maybe I'll like, when I meet a Swedish person, I'll need to make them laugh and be like, ha ha ha, silly Danes. No offense, Danes. You're great. So yeah, so that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Anyway, I think that's unsensible.
Like you were saying, they go hand in hand. They're almost like the twin killers, basically. Because
oh God, I know it's horrific. I'm just busyness. I'm just having a reminding myself, feeling overwhelmed, laziness. Yeah, yeah. Because the thing is that like, as I, talking to Matt and Abigail about busyness is perfect because I mean, Abigail. She makes me feel lazy in terms of like I'm like but she I think like in reality if I want to learn languages I will, and it's unless it's kind of there is a big emotional thing going on where it's just not a helpful escape. Worst crime, despite I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist about language learning, but since I've spoken to you, I'm like, no, I just am like, because I'm, so maybe because I'm, maybe it's not even I'm striving specifically for perfectionism, but I have those like obsessive tendencies when I'm doing the learning but that's more of a problem than whether I'm ultimately striving for perfectionism or not. So yeah. Sorry. Anyway, carry on.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's very interesting to hear what different people struggle with. And the whole point is that it's not just, you or me or like the person watching this that's struggling with these things. It's everybody, even like the people who are out there, like the really big names like Benny Lewis, Richard Simcoe. I'm sure that they battle with these things too. Now, I don't want to speak for them and be like, they battle with these things, but to hear that they do.
I'm sure.
Rest of us. So
I imagine when you become, a big name like people like Richard or so on, I think it's that kind of which we sort of talked about at the beginning, that sort of, oh well, you can't be a polyglot unless you speak everything, you know, every word in the dictionary, or sometimes, you know, all these things where you're like, I don't know, I definitely don't know every word in English dictionaries, nowhere near. So yeah, so I just think it's one of those, there's something, maybe perfectionism fear is even higher when it's like, this is my career, I've made a career out of knowing languages or learning languages, and now I have to be a perfectionist. I don't know, maybe that's even worse. Maybe we've got it lucky. Maybe we should be thankful, Angie.
We should.
So I don't know, interesting. Okay. Oh, just
Yeah,
love this chat. Sorry.
one thing I wanted to point out that's so ironic about this is it's a video on perfectionism, a chat about perfectionism. And this is the one live stream so far where I have had like huge technological difficulties, starting with my headphones not working before we even got on this. Then this one was my fault. This one was having the video on in the background so I could see the chat and everything, but not playing out loud at the same time as this. And then
don't worry.
Internet dying. So I just thought, like, how ironic that we're talking about perfectionism and then
Yeah,
the most imperfect had.
Yeah, I'm so not a perfectionist when it comes to videos, though. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to be a perfectionist when it comes to videos. You know, it's like in my priorities, which is the thing, I suppose. Which is with the thing with lots of the sort of pitfalls, I guess, of language learning. You know, it's always going to be like my work first is always going to come first, and then, you know, the things that kind of keep me a sane person, like writing, and then it's going to be, you know, then it will be language learning, and then it will be the videos, and the videos are always at the end. It's always like, I enjoy making you, but editing videos can take a very long time, and I don't necessarily, you know, it's like you can spend days and days and days editing things, and it's like, okay, I know that I could make things look a bit better, I know I could make it swishier or whatever, but also I will not get the satisfaction, I will not get the reward from investing that energy, that kind of obsessive energy into a video that I would if I was writing a play, or if I was, you know, writing an essay, really. So yeah, or doing French grammar.
Mm-hmm. I have one last question. Do you have any final thoughts or comments on the topic that we haven't talked about already that maybe you would have thought of during our conversation or anything?
Just that you have such a calming voice, and so going through this with you was really helpful. And what, I don't know, I just think I think this is something I really need to think about more. Like maybe in like I don't know, a year's time or 6 months or so, we should come back and talk about it and be like, okay, how's your perfectionism going? Because, you know, I feel like I need to go and yeah, exactly. And then maybe we could be really YouTubey and do it in all caps and say exposed. Sorry, Angela. Anyway, but yeah, I think that yeah, I think it's something I need to think about more, because I think I maybe explain away, oh, it's just my personality, and I probably need to think about why I have the desire to. And is it purely because I find it enjoyable and there's nothing at that time that I would prefer to be doing? Or is it because, like, am I trying to impress myself? Am I trying to impress someone else? It's most likely that I'm trying to impress myself, but that's futile. So yeah, I think I need to go and think about this more. That's the main thought that I've had. I think I kind of thought about it being like, yeah, perfectionism in language learning, like, don't worry about it. And actually, what does perfectionism in language learning mean? What does it mean generally? Does it mean different things in different languages according to the internet? Does it mean different things in different languages according to different speakers that you'll come across? Does it mean different things when, like, in different contexts? I had not even consciously thought that much about the fact that I speak English with the wrong grammar when I'm, like, having fun. That's bizarre. So yeah, so I think I don't know, I have things to think about, and, you know, I feel like, I don't know, it maybe be interesting to kind of, or at least I'd love to find out, you know, if you I don't know, have, like, if anything changes after your thoughts about perfectionism as well. What about you? What have you thought about over the course of this conversation?
I think there's so much food for thought, seriously.
Yeah.
take in from this, and that perfectionism is, there's so many sides to it. It's not just, you hear the word perfectionism, automatically you think of something negative. And then a lot of the time, like you said, it's a lot of people just saying, don't be a perfectionist. But there's so much more to it than that.
For sure.
There's different kinds of perfectionism. There's different factors that bring on perfectionism. There's different ways to kind of like deal with it, I guess, or to
exactly.
So I know for me, there's a lot to think about as well and reevaluate, especially about the way that I think about things, because I kind of have that achiever personality where I like to make goals and like complete them. But then also I have that personality where someone may say something and it could like really affect my thoughts on it. So something I definitely need to be working on.
Yeah, I think I also need to be more honest about how the extent to which other people affect with me and my goals as well. Because I think at the moment I'm like, it's just for me, guys. And actually, I think I just no, I want everyone's validation all the time. Like, give me your love. So not your love, it's the validation. Be like, say, did I do okay? Can you tell me that I did fine? And so there's something about me. I did everything I possibly could. See, you know, I don't know. Dobby had to iron his hands. There's something a bit like that I feel. So sorry for the Harry Potter reference. So yeah, I think I need to go away and think hard and be honest with myself.
And I do think that a lot of the time when we put ourselves out there, like it takes a lot to put ourselves out there. We're kind of afraid. You never know what you're going to get, especially with trolls out there. But I know that sometimes we go there. At least this has kind of happened to me a little bit, where I put something out there and I feel like, okay, I think I did well. And so I'm kind of seeking like someone to say good job instead of, you know, then you get the thing of, well, you should have used this word instead of this word. And I'm like, man, I thought I did a great job. And it's not that I didn't do a good job. It's that there's a better option. And it's like, if I didn't have that mindset of like, just tell me I did well, then, you know, that wouldn't happen.
Interesting. Yeah. So interesting. So interesting to chat to you, and so nice to meet you, because I've been, I don't know, watching your videos for at least 2 years, and I just think you're so lovely. So yeah.
You are, like I said before, always so encouraging and kind and positive to other people. And I think it's rare and a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I mean, sometimes the internet isn't like the most positive space, and it's like, okay, well, this is the bit of internet space that I have. I don't know, let's try. So yeah, it's something that's very kind of you to say, that I've got so much validation out of that. So yeah, but thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. And people, check out, I have her links down below in the description box. Like, check out her website, check out everything, like social media, check out her channel.
I don't think I have a website, but otherwise, or maybe I do. It's not really in use. Yeah, no, don't check that out, because then I look at it in shame. I'm like, oh God. You know, anyway, sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Don't.
Sorry. Check out her stuff. Check out her channel. She's got wonderful as well. Like, she's such a fantastic person. And yeah, so happy to have you. Check out her talk at the Polyglot Conference. Oh my gosh, so exciting. Congratulations.
Gosh, I'm really hoping that, like, Alex, I know Alex Rawlings is speaking, so I'm hoping that it's like Alex Rawlings or someone else that's like famous within the polyglot community, like Omnigloss is speaking, I think. And you know, and you're like, okay, please, can you speak at the same time as me? So then no one will come to my talk, and that is good. That's the plan. So go to the other one. No, that's my. But I think if I tell people that, I don't know if that will have the opposite effect, or whether people will be like, cool, I'm on board with that idea. But yeah, because otherwise, you know, it's just gonna be a history talk. Don't come. No. That one comment, oh my goodness, Athena, come on. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much. And also, obviously, if you're here for my things, which I don't know, obviously Angela is a darling and you need her in your life. So thank you so much for having me.
I'm so grateful to have had you for this episode and to meet you and everything. So happy. She's such a wonderful person. Go check out her stuff. And yeah, so with that,
the clock is going, so that means
an hour,
we're in Animal Crossing
going off.
It's
And
perfect.
yeah, so I'll see everybody in the next episode of Assassins of Language Learning. If you're not familiar with the series, there is a playlist of the previous episodes, so you could check out those topics and how people best overcome them or what doesn't work for them. So yeah, check it out. Check out Ophelia's things, and I'll see you guys next time.
Just
Bye-bye.
by Tarantula.